Christmas is a time of magic, joy, and wonder, when the whole world is filled with warmth and light. But what if what seems like a holiday to us actually hides terrible secrets? Behind the sparkling Christmas tree lights and joyful laughter, there are stories that were never meant to be told. You'll hear 10 real-life Christmas horror stories, each of which will make you question what happens on this holy night. Prepare yourself, because these stories will keep you from having a peaceful Christmas. Santa Claus's Icy Stare. 2007. Lisa and her children came to the mall to take a picture with Santa Claus. It was a normal Christmas, and the kids were happy to see him. But when they approached Santa, Lisa immediately felt a strange uneasiness. Santa looked different than usual. His eyes were cold and empty, and his smile looked mechanical, as if he wasn't a living person. As the children settled into his lap, Lisa felt that look penetrating her. Suddenly, Santa whispered softly, "You're going to lose them soon." Lisa thought it was just a joke at first, but she couldn't get rid of the uneasy feeling. A couple weeks later, on Christmas Day, there was a fire in their house. Lisa and her husband were able to get out, but the children didn't make it out of the room with the fire engulfing everything. When Lisa returned to the mall to find Santa, she learned that the man had never been seen, and had never been seen in the area. The police couldn't find any trace of Santa, and no one knew who he was. Lisa was sure. His words were a warning, the mystery of an old toy. When Emily and her family moved into their new home, they found a strange box of toys in the attic, antique and covered in dust. Among them was one doll with sealing eyes wearing a pink dress with ruffles. Emily, a curious girl, decided to take this doll and put it next to the bed. From that moment on, events began that became a nightmare for the family. Every night when Emily fell asleep, she woke up to the doll changing its position. It was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the window, and sometimes standing on its feet, as if someone invisible was making it move. One night, Emily awoke from a terrible cold and found the doll standing at her headboard, a smile on her face that hadn't been there before. A few days later, the family felt as if the doll was watching their every move. When they tried to get rid of it by throwing it in the trash, the doll would mysteriously return to the house. One night, after Emily and her parents tried to burn the toy, they heard echoes of strange laughter. The doll disappeared, but from then on, a child's voice was often heard in the house, and at night, a faint glow could be seen coming from Emily's room. The Curse of the Christmas Tree. In 1968, the Cartwright family decided to buy a tree for Christmas from an old store in a quiet town. The tree looked ordinary, medium height, with fluffy branches and brightly colored needles. It was perfect for decorating the house and creating a holiday atmosphere. But from the first day after the tree was set up in the living room, strange things started to happen. The lights on the Christmas tree began to flicker and the house felt cold, which could not be explained by anything. The first day after the Christmas tree was set up, there was a strange noise in the house, as if someone was quietly pacing the rooms, and then a noise was heard like someone was throwing something at the floor. The whole family searched the house but found no trace of it. The strangeness continued, and the next morning when the family gathered for breakfast, they discovered that one of the toys on the Christmas tree had disappeared. Trying to figure out the cause, they decided to examine the Christmas tree closely and found strange symbols burned right into the wood in its trunk. The symbols looked like ancient runes that were only familiar to those who studied mysticism and the history of the region. When the family tried to cut down the tree to get rid of it, they realized that it had literally turned to stone and they couldn't even cut it with a saw. That night, there was a fire that destroyed the entire house, but the Christmas tree remained intact. The locals claim that the tree was connected to the curse of an ancient cemetery that was located on the site of their house. Shadow at Christmas. The James family always took pride in their cozy home in London. Every year they gathered at Christmas to decorate the tree and enjoy the warmth of family comfort. But one ominous night, everything changed. This time, as they gathered around the fireplace, the dog began barking at an empty corner in the living room while no one could figure out what was bothering him so much. A few days later, the weirdness continued. Dark figures began to appear in the reflections of mirrors, and one day James noticed a strange movement outside the window. It was a dark shadow standing against the snow. He ran to the window, but the figure was gone. Instead, there were only deep footprints in the snow, leading into the forest. He felt icy cold and couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The next Christmas, James saw the same figure through the window, but now the shadow was much closer. That night they heard footsteps in the house. The next day they found strange symbols scratched into the walls. They were ancient runes that local researchers identified as signs of an ancient curse. And with each Christmas, the James family felt more and more that their home had become something sinister, and that this spirit was no longer going to leave them. The curse of Christmas night. The Bell family rented an old house in the countryside, and even though the locals whispered about the curses that surrounded the place, they decided to spend Christmas there anyway. At midnight, as they gathered around the fireplace, strange sounds began. First, it was footsteps that sounded louder and louder, as if someone was walking through the house. Then they began to hear whispering, and in the corner of the room, a figure in period clothing appeared, looking like the Christmas spirit. It stood as still as a stone, not moving or saying a word. The family moved closer, but as soon as they got closer, the figure disappeared, and the room was filled with a terrible cold. A few days later, one of the family members disappeared. The search was fruitless, and even the police couldn't find any trace of him. Since then, every Christmas Eve, the Bell family has felt the presence of this figure. Locals say that the spirit of Christmas took him away to be part of his eternal army. Ghost in the night of Christmas. The Clark family lived in an old house in New York that had been passed down through inheritance. It stood on the outskirts of the city and always seemed quaint. Old wooden beams, boarded up windows, and dim lights in the surrounding yards. On Christmas Day 1992, they decided to celebrate the holiday in this house, not realizing that behind the festive atmosphere lurked something sinister. On the night of December 24, 25, when they were already sitting at the table and enjoying dinner, strange events began to happen. First, the lights began to flicker, and then everything in the house plunged into darkness. The children began to hear footsteps on the stairs and someone chuckling softly in the dark hallway. The father, George, got up to check who it could be, but when he approached, no one was there. He returned to the dining room again, but there was a look of fear on his face. He said that on the second floor, just outside their bedroom door, he saw a figure, a woman in old black clothes with her hair loose, standing in the hallway as if waiting. Her eyes were completely black and her gaze was blank. When he tried to move closer, the figure disappeared, leaving behind only a cold, ominous wind. From that moment on, the Clark family noticed that something was changing. Every year on Christmas night, they would hear footsteps on the stairs and a woman's laughter. And in the morning, there would be small figures left on the table, looking like toys from the last century that no one could put there. A strange Christmas tree from the woods. Christmas 2001 was something terrible for the Wilson family. They lived in a house on the outskirts of town, and every Christmas they put up a tree they bought from the local forester. But this year, things went wrong. The tree they brought home was strange, especially its odor. It was pungent, as if the tree had not been cut recently. The day after they set it up in the corner of the living room, strange things started happening. Suddenly, all the toys from the top branches disappeared. The parents thought the kids had just taken them down, but every time they came home, they found that the toys had disappeared again. After about a week, the family noticed that small wood figures covered in strange symbols started appearing under the Christmas tree. As they were trying to figure it out, a forester came to them and told them that this Christmas tree had been cut down from a tree that grew in a forbidden part of the forest where an ancient pagan cemetery was rumored to be located. He warned them not to keep such a Christmas tree in the house as it could bring trouble. The next morning after his visit, they woke up to find the Christmas tree gone. Although they thought they had simply swept it up and thrown it away, the strange footprints in the snow leading into the woods left no doubt. Something dark had taken the tree and carried it into the woods. Mystery play with children. 1985, Canadian countryside. The Miller family decided to spend Christmas in their old house, which was in the center of a small town. It was business as usual until their two children, David and Sarah, went to play in the snow. The mother, who was preparing a holiday dinner, didn't notice the children running outside, but a few minutes later, she glanced out the window and saw them running around an abandoned house that had long been recognized as cursed. At first, she didn't think anything strange, but when she called out for them to come back, the children didn't respond. Their footsteps, on the contrary, became faster and faster, as if they were playing some strange game. When the mother ran outside, she saw the children disappear from sight. She immediately called the police, but the search for them yielded no results. The search continued for several days, and still no one saw the children. It wasn't until a week later that a child's toy ball that David and Sarah had taken with them was found in an old abandoned house, but what was striking was that it had strange marks on it, as if someone had picked it up from the ground but had left ancient muddy palm prints on it. The story was never explained, and to this day people in that neighborhood say they hear quiet children's laughter and see silhouettes running around that very house. A letter from the deceased. In 1997, the Reed family was shocked by an unexpected find. On Christmas night, as they were decorating the tree, their 8-year-old son Tim saw a strange card in the pocket of one of his new jackets. He showed it to his parents, and they noticed that the letter was addressed to them, with a signature they recognized, "Love, your son." The letter was handwritten, and the content was strange and disturbing. It spoke of how their son was not actually away on a trip, as they thought, but was in another reality, in a place their family couldn't get to. The postcard was signed with the same words Tim often used, but the handwriting was as if it were someone else's. The locals claimed that the letter was a message from the other world, which could have been sent using old Christmas magic that allowed communication with the dead. Since that time, every Christmas Eve at the Reed house, somewhere in the dark corners, Tim's footsteps and laughter could be heard. People believe he didn't leave, but stayed here forever, carrying his darkness and mysterious letters. The mystery of the Christmas ring. In 1945, the Sharp family moved into an old house in the north of England, which used to be the home of noble families. At Christmas, while they were decorating the house, they found a ring sealed in a wooden box in one of the drawers of old furniture. It was an unusual ring engraved with ancient symbols. When the lady of the house put the ring on, strange events began. At night, indistinct shadows appeared on the walls, and even at night, the door to the basement of the house could open by itself. After several weeks, when the family tried to get rid of the ring, it would reappear in the house. The locals said that the ring belonged to an ancient sorcerer who had sworn never to leave the house. The night the ring disappeared, the family heard footsteps on the floors, and in the morning, the object lay on their doorstep in a place where no one could leave it. The ring remained forever in the house, a reminder of an ancient curse.